It's August 14th, 1996. We're at Dartmouth University in America, where the chemist Karen Wetterhan is hard at work in her lab. This 48-year-old is a leading expert in toxic metals, and today she's backed by a $7 million grant from the US National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, studying one of the deadliest substances known to man. It's called dimethylmercury. It's a clear, colourless liquid and it looks harmless, but if even the smallest amount is absorbed by the body, this compound is utterly fatal. Funnily enough, it's this toxic character to dimethylmercury which has attracted Karen's attention. She's investigating how this dangerous compound causes damage at the molecular level. Though perhaps a risky subject of investigation, Wetterhan is no fool. She's doing everything by the book. She's wearing gloves, she's working with a fume extractor, and she's handling this deadly compound with extreme care. Care or not though, she is still a pioneer. Dimethylmercury is rare, and there simply haven't been enough researchers willing or able to get close to it in the past. Of those who have, some even paid for it with their lives. This means that very few people know the dark truth about this compound, a truth that Karen will soon discover. She doesn't know it yet, but the safety protocols that she's following will soon be rewritten in her blood. Karen begins. She draws some of the toxic compound out of a vial using a thin pipette. So far, so good. But then she slips. As she gently squeezes the dimethylmercury from the pipette into a sample tube, she spills a couple of drops onto her left hand. They're tiny, smaller than raindrops. There's no reason to panic though, she thinks. She is, after all, wearing latex gloves. Wetterhan seals and labels the sample tube, then peels off her gloves and washes her hands. They're all standard safety procedures. It's just another day on the job. Karen finishes up in the lab and goes home. But little does she know that right now, she's making a terrible mistake. Instead of returning to her husband and children, she should be rushing to the hospital as quickly as possible. Every second counts now. The longer she waits, the slimmer her chances become. And soon, it'll all be too late. But tragically, Karen Wetterhan has no idea what's just happened to her in the lab. And as a consequence, right now, a massive dose of super toxic mercury is rushing through her bloodstream and up into her brain, where it will slowly eat away at her nervous system, cell by cell. Over the coming weeks, Wetterhan carries on as usual with her work, but at around 3 months later, she starts to feel strange. Her sense of balance is off and she can't walk straight. She's tripping over and bumping into doors with no idea why. She's also slurring her words, and to top it all off, she's losing weight very quickly. On some days, Karen is even calling her husband and asking him to pick her up from work. She's just too sick to drive home. Her stomach hurts all the time and she's suffering from random waves of diarrhea. These aren't symptoms of laziness, tiredness, or some flu. Wetterhan knows this. She's a dedicated and focused person. Something must be very wrong. Eventually, after 2 months of symptoms, Karen decides that enough is enough, and she checks herself into the hospital at the Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Centre and tells them she's worried about her condition. By now, Wetterhan has almost lost 7 kilos, and when the doctors see her, they notice just how thin she looks. They perform some tests, and the results are worrying. Wetterhan is struggling with her coordination. She can't judge distances, nor can she make even simple movements with the correct speed or power. It's why she's been falling over so often. Doctors also notice that Wetterhan is speaking strangely. She's stumbling over her words and pausing for a long time between sentences. This isn't like her at all. Her brain is saying one thing, her body is doing another. All the signs point to serious neurological issues. Strangely though, when the doctors give her an MRI scan, everything looks normal. Doctors put their head together and try to work out what's wrong with Karen. That's when the neurologist Richard Nordgren makes an assumption. Wetterhan is a toxic metal specialist. She works with mercury, and her symptoms show signs of mercury poisoning. So, they test Karen's blood and urine, and what they discover spells tragedy for the chemist. Her blood mercury level is 4,000 times higher than normal. It's a shocking diagnosis. One doctor even takes Wetterhan's husband aside and asks him if his wife has any enemies. If so, might they have tried to poison her? The answer, of course, is a resounding no. Karen Wetterhan is a respected scientist and philanthropist. She's not in the crosshairs for any sort of attack. Somehow then, Wetterhan has absorbed a massive amount of mercury. For months, it's been ravaging her brain, binding to her neurons and draining them of the precious sulfur they need to work. It explains everything: her trouble walking, talking, hearing, and seeing. Well, it explains almost everything. Nobody has any idea how Wetterhan absorbed this much mercury in the first place. Wetterhan's family and co-workers are tested immediately for mercury poisoning. The lab is swept for any signs of a spill, leak, or contamination. But there's nothing. Everybody's clean, and so is the lab. Then, scanning her memories for anything that might help, Wetterhan suddenly remembers the incident from the previous summer, how she spilled a tiny amount of dimethylmercury on her hand. At the time, though, she didn't consider it an incident. She was wearing gloves, after all. How could she have been poisoned? Wetterhan tells her doctors, and straight away they start aggressive chelation therapy. Every day, Wetterhan must take medication that draws the mercury away from her neurons like a magnet and binds it so that her body can excrete it. But the treatment isn't working. Unfortunately, it's already far too late for Wetterhan. Now, Karen is feeling a strange tingling sensation in her fingers. She's seeing flashes of light in her eyes, and she can hear a constant background noise in her ears. The mercury ions are attacking her brain and nervous system at a punishing rate, and doctors can only look on in horror as the scientist before them lays trapped in her body, her mind slipping further and further away from the real world. She's alive and awake, but sealed in a tomb of darkness. And the worst thing, by now, Wetterhan knows exactly what's happening. She is an expert after all, and she's well acquainted with the effects of mercury poisoning. Only now, rather than reading about them in a book, she's living the horror firsthand. She knows that soon she'll no longer be able to communicate with the outside world ever again, and then eventually she'll die. Soon enough, Wetterhan stops responding to light, sound, or touch. She enters a vegetative state for the most part, except for random moments of extreme agitation where she cries out, only to fall back down onto the bed in silence. One day, as her husband sits beside her, he spots a tear rolling down her cheek. He asks the doctors if she's in pain, but they tell him no. It's unlikely that her brain could even register pain by this point. Eventually, after only 3 weeks in the hospital, Wetterhan enters into the final stage of mercury poisoning. She slips into a coma. Wetterhan's colleague Kent Sudgeon would later say, "It was obvious that the chelation therapy wasn't working when she went into a coma. Many of us saw it as merciful." Doctors realise there's nothing more they can do, and so on June 8th, 1997, 10 months after that fateful day in the lab, Wetterhan finally passes away. So, what happened? How did Wetterhan manage to get poisoned by such a high dose of mercury despite wearing gloves? Doctors tried to work it out. After all, even though Karen had spilled some of the dimethylmercury on her glove, there was no hole or tear in the fabric. But when they finally discover the real reason, they also uncover a shocking new truth about Wetterhan's toxic compound. And in the end, she never stood a chance. Latex gloves offer no protection against dimethylmercury. The compound's molecules can soak right through the material like it's a sponge. This meant that on the 14th of August, when Karen Wetterhan spilled a few drops of this super toxic compound onto her glove, the danger was immediate but invisible. The dimethylmercury passed straight through the latex, through the skin of her hand, and into her bloodstream. The liquid also evaporates almost instantly, so fast that Wetterhan wouldn't have even felt a trace of wetness inside the glove. There was no sting on her hand, no hole in her glove, and no dampness that could have raised the alarm. During Wetterhand's autopsy, the doctors uncovered the full horror of what had been happening inside her body. It's no wonder her symptoms were so severe. Wetterhand's body was dehydrated and she had a lung infection. Her cortex, the outer layer of the brain, was much thinner than it should have been, and she had scarring all over the parts of her brain that control vision and hearing. What's more, the back part of the brain, which helps with movement and balance, had actually shrunk. Everything in the autopsy pointed to one grim conclusion. Wetterhand's brain had been under attack for months. Perhaps if she'd rushed herself to hospital on that day in August, she would still be alive today. John Wynne, the chairman of the chemistry department at Dartmouth University, said that Karen had no idea she was in peril. None of the chemists here would have felt in peril. It was a sad end for a respected scientist pushing the boundaries of her field. Others, at her funeral, however, said that there was a silver lining in that she lived and died doing what she loved, studying toxic metals. In the 1990s, people knew so little about dimethylmercury that the safety standards simply hadn't been written yet. The compound was used exclusively for research, and very few people had the chance, or misfortune, to work with this compound up close. Wetterhand was working with the best knowledge and safety procedures of the time, but it just wasn't enough. Dimethylmercury, as scientists know now, is one of the most toxic substances to humans on the planet. Wetterhand's death, however, was not in vain. Her colleagues later published research that led to better chemical and lab safety standards. Now, dimethylmercury is rarely handled or transported, and it's practically impossible to buy. Many institutes have removed their supply altogether. And when dimethylmercury does need to be handled, scientists must wear 2 pairs of gloves, including a pair of heavier, laminated gloves. They need to also wear a face shield, and on top of that, they need to get regular blood and urine tests, all to avoid Wetterhand's grisly fate. Wetterhand herself, in true form to her relentless scientific mind, kept working from her hospital bed. She meticulously documented her symptoms, tracking the mercury's damage to her body and studying her own decline with the same focus she brought to every experiment. She kept going, right up until the moment her body simply wouldn't let her anymore. Those final notes, written in the shadow of her own death, have helped the scientific community to properly understand and protect against the dangers of dimethylmercury. Ed Dudek, a postdoc that worked in one of Wetterhand's study groups, later said, "The accident was a wake-up call. We're now extremely aware of everything we're doing." Indeed, scientists around the world are now fully informed of just how toxic dimethylmercury can be, and thanks to Wetterhand's sacrifice. In the end, by losing her life, Karen Wetterhand may have saved many others.
In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout,